This is what it means if they didn't go to the moon, and we're right that they lied about it. It means that the people controlling the government are not the Congress and not the Senate, that the CIA is running the country. And if they lied about the moon landings through their teeth, going to an elaborate scheme to do it, they will lie about anything and everything.
Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in. Join me as we take a walk down occult lane and cover a topic we've not covered very much in the past, and it's the topic of the moon landings. And before we begin, I just want to remind everybody that in 1968, the Club of Rome was formed, and its purpose was to create a crisis that would unite the world and condition us all to the idea of global solutions to local problems.
In a document called The First Global Revolution, authored by Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider, on pages 104 and 105, it stated, "In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers, of course, will be caused by human intervention that will require a global response." That's the origin of global warming, ladies and gentlemen.
And then UNESCO was formed, and its goal is to dumb us all down and make our children global citizens and hardcore humanists, removing God and all conversations about God from the schools. They've lied to us about vaccines, they've lied to us about 9/11, and I think they've probably lied to us about whether we ever really went to the moon. I'm very pleased to welcome Bart Sabrell. He's the producer and director of the 2001 film A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. He also produced Astronauts Gone Wild, an investigation into the authenticity of the moon landings. He was a contributor to the Fox special Conspiracy Theory, Did We Really Land on the Moon? You can find him on YouTube as Bart Sabrell and visit his website, sabrell.com. Bart, thanks for joining us.
How's it going, Sean?
It's going well. I'm really happy to have you on. You know, I watched your film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, many years ago, and I've watched it again since. I think it is just a fantastic documentary because, you know what? It forces people to use their critical thinking skills. And once you start to do that, you discover sound bites like this one. Let me play this, Bart, just to set the stage for our skeptics out there and the hardcore believers that believe much that they were told as children. This is from NASA's Eugene Kranz, who said they just don't have the telemetry data anymore.
I haven't seen anything that indicates the telemetry data is even in existence, and as I said, even if we had it, we don't have the machines to play it back.
But your own research has shown the telemetry data is missing.
That's right.
You know, I'll pause it there. Just explain to me what inspired you way back in 2001, before most any of us had even woken up, to the New World Order and to all the lies. I mean, I think the CIA famously, one of the CIA officials famously once said, our mission will be complete once everything Americans believe is a lie. So what inspired you to make the film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon?
Well, I grew up as the biggest fan of the moon missions. My father was in the United States Air Force, and as an officer, he received a VIP press package of about 20 9x12 color prints of the first mission to the moon. I was about 4 years old at the time, asleep in bed, and a few weeks later, he got the package of pictures, gave them to me as a cherished present, and I had them on my wall. Every day I saw them, 365 days a year, times 10 years, over 3,600 times I looked at those pictures and believed we went to the moon. And then by the age of 14, 10 years later, I saw a television program with its guest, a gentleman by the name of William Casing, who worked for Rocketdyne. And because he was an editor of interdepartmental memos, he was one of the few people who saw the whole picture of the space program, departmentalization being one of the methods they use for secrecy. He was above that, had high security clearance, and he saw a memo that said the likelihood of going to the moon on the first attempt with 1960s technology and returning the men safely to Earth was about 1 in 10,000. So I, after the program, went to the bedroom wall, and sure enough, I looked at these pictures with new eyes. The important thing is that it caught me as an open-minded 14-year-old. And in order to see the truth, we have to be open-minded. In fact, one of the greatest stumbling blocks to perceiving the truth is our own pride. pride blinds us from seeing the truth. And fortunately, this notion that the moon landings might have been falsified caught me open-mindedly. And I looked at the pictures, and sure enough, there were anomalies in the photographs, which I discussed, and a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. Then you add another 10 years to that. By the time I was 24, I had become a filmmaker. My job as a filmmaker is to make fake scenes look real. I even got complimented one day by a filmmaker with more experience than me, and he said, "Bart, I love the way you used the sunset out the window." And I said, well, that was actually an electrical light that we had mimicking the sun. So that's how I discerned that the pictures were not real, that they were lit in a television studio, because that's the craft that I worked with. And I can tell you even what kind of lighting they used, that it was not sunlight, it was electrical light, and it was this kind of electrical light. Well, there I am, 24 years old, editing a film one day for the producer of the TV show I'd seen 10 years earlier as a 14-year-old, whose guest said we didn't go to the moon. And I said, "Do you remember the guy who said that?" And he said, "No, I don't remember, but call the San Francisco production office." I called them up, and they said, "Good thing you called today, because we're about to delete all 10-year-old files, and you would have never been able to track down the guy." So I tracked him down. And already then I was thinking, Sean, if they didn't go to the moon, they might have killed this guy and had someone impersonate him so that whistleblowers would come to him and they could take care of that. So I even called him from a payphone across the street just to make sure I was being as cautious as possible. But within a few minutes, he had this great grandfatherly personality that I knew he was genuine. And he suggested that I do a film about it, being a filmmaker. Well, I paid my salary myself for about 6 months out of savings and did nothing but research how the shadows that should be parallel in sunlight intersect, sometimes at 90 degrees, how 2 of the 3 astronauts from the first mission rarely give interviews, how the administrator of NASA resigned days before the first mission, how the Soviets had launched the first satellite, the first animal, the first man, the first woman, the first spacewalk, the first crew of 3. All these firsts, 5 times the amount of hours in space as the U.S., and they never went to the moon. And I started thinking, maybe the guy's right. I would say at that point, I estimated there was about a 1 out of 4 chance that the moon landings were fake. Seeing how it's the greatest event in history, next to creation and the Messiah coming, I'd say that's a dangerous possibility. Now, I have a relentless personality. I've always liked puzzles. I even drew mazes as a kid. And I said, if they didn't go to the moon, I'm the type of guy who could dig that up because I like puzzles and I'm relentless. So I actually, Sean, turned down the project for fear of my life. I said, if they didn't go to the moon, this could be dangerous looking into this. And I wanted to have a wife and family someday. And I said, why should I risk my life for someone else's folly years ago? So I actually turned down the project. Then another 5 years go by. I started reading the Bible at the request of a client who said, hey, if you read the Bible, I'd get this script of yours to a famous filmmaker. I picked up the one-year Bible in 1989. And in 5 years, I had read the Bible 5 times. And I still wasn't a Christian, but I at least had a foundation that there is right and wrong, there is light and darkness, and there is a distinction between the two. And that if they didn't go to the moon, I realized, Sean, that that would be more profound of an event historically than if they'd actually gone. Let's say they could go, they could put a man on our closest planet, heavenly body to Earth, and come back, or they didn't go. They embezzled what would be now $150 billion, murdered people to keep it a secret, lied to Congress, lied to the Senate, lied to the scientific community, lied to the encyclopedias, and this is the government that claims to be the righteous light on a hill. If that happened, that would be more profound of an event historically than if they had actually gone. And I realized this might well be the case. And for the sake of history, like having a cure for cancer that's repressed, I said, I'm going to die anyway, and I might as well die for a purpose. So I changed my mind 5 years later. I started producing. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon. We raised about $1 million to produce these films, and the financier of our films is right now a board member of an aerospace company building rockets for NASA, who wishes to remain anonymous. And he knows from an engineering point of view, the the calculators that they had back then, the computer processing power, which is 1/1,000,000th that in all of NASA that a modern day cell phone could not calculate the trajectories and the synchronizing of the two rockets, mating, lifting off from the moon and mating with the spacecraft allegedly orbiting the moon.
Well, and not to mention, let me jump in and say, not to mention the impossibility of real-time communications at a distance of 240,000 miles. I mean, the point is that anybody with a cell phone who's lost signal knows that it would probably be very difficult with late 1960s technology to communicate in real time with a spacecraft 240,000 miles away, Bart.
Well, yeah, this investor who has an IQ in the range of Bill Gates and Einstein, who put up $1 million, who's right now building rockets for NASA, okay? He knows from an engineering point of view that they cannot go to the moon today, much less 50 years ago. The reason why they destroyed all the technology and all the blueprints and all the data that would have proved how they did it was to mask the fact that they didn't do it. So they're saying they spent $150 billion to go to the moon, and the rocket specifications to prove how they did it, they deliberately destroyed. The telemetry data to prove where the spacecrafts were, they deliberately destroyed. And all the original photographs and videotapes which would prove it, they deliberately destroyed. The fact that they destroyed it is proof that they didn't go, because if they really went, they would never destroy it. But if they falsified it, and all that data and blueprints could prove the rocket didn't have enough fuel, the computers didn't have enough processing power, or the lunar module didn't have enough batteries, then they would destroy it, which is exactly what they did. Yeah. So the fact that they destroyed all that data.
Yeah, it speaks to the cover-up of a crime. I just want to give people sort of my top 5 anomalies that make me believe it's highly unlikely that men were sent to the moon. And in fact, this was a production sold to the American people and sold to the global population as massive propaganda. Here's the first one, the Van Allen radiation belts. And number 2, Bart, landing the lunar module.
Someone apparently forgot to create a burn crater underneath the lunar module's 10,000-pound thrust engine, despite the fact that during ground tests there was a real concern for the vehicle falling into the hole the engine created as it descended. Not even one speck of moon dust on the landing pod. As a result, all subsequent flights had to have the same discrepancy, which was explained away by the effect of no atmosphere.
And they were never able to land it successfully in tests on Earth. Number 3, the audacity of telling us they brought a rover, a dune buggy, to the moon. I mean, are you serious? They had this thing down so perfectly well, and it was so easy and so risk-free that they brought the extra added weight of a dune buggy so they could tool around on the moon. It's absolutely preposterous.
The cost of the 3 moon rovers in 21st century currency? Nearly $60 million each, though they had fewer parts than a Jeep. Where was all this money going?
Number 4, background mountains in many of these pictures are identical, and it's impossible for them to be identical. Here's one with the lunar module. And then here's the same mountain shown with no lunar module. And number 5, the Apollo 11 post-moon landing conference with Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, and Neil Armstrong, where it feels a lot more like a funeral than a hero's welcoming of 3 men that just landed on the moon.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
Those are sort of my top 5 anomalies that make me believe that there's more to the story, Bart.
Well, Sean, believe it or not, if you read this article, which you're going to link in your video, which is called Did They Really Walk on the Moon 48 years ago on the very first attempt? There is so much evidence in that article. Now, it's a lengthy article, and it has lots of video clips and references. There's so much more proof that they did not go than the fact that they claim that they did. And here's why. If you could name any time in world history, so we got, at least 6,000 years or more of civilization, if you can mention just one other time in which a milestone was met, like let's say first flight in 1903 by the Wright brothers, or crossing the Atlantic in 1927 by Lindbergh, or the atomic bomb in 1945, or breaking the sound barrier in 1947, or climbing Mount Everest, or going to the South Pole. If you could mention any other milestone in history that once it was broken, no one on Earth from any country was able to repeat it for 50 years. The only instance that has happened is the moon landings. Because if they could go to the moon on the very first attempt with 1960s technology, men would have been on Mars 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so illogical.
Absolutely.
It's unbelievable. It's like someone saying we split the atom, but we can't repeat it for 70 years. They're saying it's going to take 20 years from today to, quote, return to the moon. But their goal in the 60s was only 8 years. So with 50 years older technology, it only took them 8 years to go to the moon. And now with half a century, better rockets and computers, it's going to take them 20 years to go to the moon. The farthest they can go today is 1/1000th, as they claim to have gone 50 years ago, with 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone, with all that antiquated technology. It just is completely illogical. The only reason why people still believe we went to the moon, despite that obviousness, is because it's a positive conspiracy. I don't know of any other positive conspiracy. I mean, whoever killed JFK, he's dead. Whoever did 9/11, 3,000 people are dead. But this is a positive conspiracy. We went to the moon. America's great during the Nixon administration, during the Vietnam War protests, a distraction, a pep rally, something to feel good about. Your team won the Super Bowl. Well, what if I told you, Sean, your team, your hometown, they cheated to do it? You're ready to punch me in the face. And what if it's true? I mean, it's to me, it's so amazing. There's so much proof that they didn't go compared to their acclaimed of the fact that they claimed they went to the moon. There's really no comparison.
Yeah. Well, let me back you up here. You know, cars have gotten more economical and more powerful. You know, certainly better since, the Model T. Same with computers. They've become faster and more powerful and much smaller. We now have iPhones, as you said, in our pockets with more computing power than NASA had to send these astronauts to the moon. And here's NASA's Don Pettit saying, darn it, we'd love to go back to the moon, but we destroyed all the technology that got us there.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
We destroyed that technology, Bart. It's a painful process to get it back, doggone it. Oh, shucks.
So let's pretend, Sean, that you believe we went to the moon. I'm going to help you win the debate. You tell me one other time in the entire history of the world when a new technology was developed and they deliberately destroyed it. See, then I go, hello? Because it's never happened. There's never been a technology that a breakthrough was made, electricity, or the telephone, or the atomic bomb, or putting a man on the moon. Oh, just that one. There's never been a time when a new technology was deliberately destroyed, except the technology to go to the moon. Because if they kept all the blueprints and all the schematics, you could prove scientifically that it was impossible. We have publications from von Braun himself. He's the guy who designed the rocket. And he said originally it would take 3 rockets, each taller than the Empire State Building, each weighing 800,000 tons to reach to the moon. And the Saturn V only weighed 2,500 tons.
Yeah.
It's a difference of 30,000%. And then he said you'd have to have a space station built first, ferry all of the extra fuel, and from there go to the moon. And then he said once you landed, you'd have to go into a cave because there would be a 50% chance every 24 hours of a catastrophic failure because of micrometeorites causing catastrophic decompression in the spacecraft or spacesuit. And they're leisurely walking around the moon for days and days, and no one ever had a micrometeorite. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable that they would bring a car to the moon and drive a distance away that they couldn't walk back in the event there was a failure in the mechanism. I mean, it's so preposterous. But people wanted to believe it. They wanted to believe in technology. They wanted to believe in America's great. And we're trying to take candy away from a baby here, Sean, in order to get people to see the truth. They don't want to give up their candy. I've talked to professors at universities who said if they saw an Apollo astronaut on national TV confess that it was fake, they would still believe that the missions were real.
Well,
they want to believe it so much.
We've been indoctrinated since children with this story. And you're right, it's a positive story. It's a patriotic story, and we want to believe it. But again, as I started this video, as I started this interview, just about everything we've ever been told has been a lie. So,
think what it means if they didn't go and lied about it. Let's think about that for a minute. This is what it means if they didn't go to the moon, and we're right that they lied about it. It means our country, the United States of America, that we're genuinely patriotic for, being an honest country, a moral country, that they lied about the greatest accomplishment of mankind. They held ticker tape parades for these people. They gave them Congressional Medals of Honor for lying. It means, because we know Congress and the Senate didn't vote for this, it means that the people controlling the government are not the Congress and not the Senate, that the CIA is running the country. And if they lied about the moon landings right in front of your eyes, through their teeth, going to an elaborate scheme to do it, they will lie about anything and everything.
Yeah.
And if that's the country that we're a part of, and if that's the country that is leading the world in democracy and freedom, then think what that really means. And people will not accept that. I talked to that professor, and he's like, well, people wouldn't do that. People wouldn't be that corrupt. Hello? We live in a world in which in the last 100 years, more people died killing each other than in the entire history of the world. Genocide, killing millions of people because of their religion, raping babies, stealing, Nobel Prizes through plagiarism. And you think no one would lie about a scientific accomplishment, a bluff and technological poker with the Soviet Union?
Well, look, it was also, I think you're hitting the nail on the head with the CIA. You've basically described the shadow government. It's now operating really in full view of everyone who's paying attention. We can see the deep state shadow government and what the CIA has been up to for so very long. These moon landings were also a way to essentially embezzle, hundreds of millions of dollars. And
billions.
Yeah, billions of dollars, in fact. So I think that you're right over the target there. But I want to circle back to Wernher von Braun, and then I want to ask you about how you think they pulled this off. Stanley Kubrick, front screen projection technology, stuff like that, if you want to weigh in. But Wernher von Braun said this, and I didn't know that he had become a godly man, but I think through his exploits with NASA, which we know was a cult institution in its foundings with Jack Parson, etc. Wernher von Braun said this, quote, "We should remember that science exists only because there are people, and its concepts exist only in the minds of men. Behind these concepts lies the reality, which is being revealed to us, but only by the grace of God." And on his tombstone, as you know, Bart, is Psalms 19:1. And if you look that up, guys, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament his handiwork." I think that may have been Wernher von Braun's way of saying, we couldn't go to the moon, and we tried really hard.
Well, seeing how we both strive to being Christians, and both of our subscribers know that, let me say this very clearly. Believing in God and being saved are two completely different things. The book of James says even the demons believe in God and shudder, and they will not be saved. So if von Braun truly believed in God, he would have confessed on camera before his death that the moon landings were fake. Buzz Aldrin told me face to face he believes in God, but he is not a Christian, and he is not saved, because the Bible says that in order to be saved, you have to renounce sin. And he continually makes his life on the sin of this lie. So believing in God and being right with God are two completely different things. The fact that there's a God is simply there's a fact. So believing in facts doesn't make you saved. Submitting to the facts is what makes you saved. And if Buzz Aldrin or Von Braun truly believed in God, they would go before the public and confess their sin, and through that they would become saved. But they didn't do it yet. Therefore, according to the Bible, not me, they are not saved. They are not right with God.
Let me ask you how you think they pulled this off. Where do you think they pulled it off? Do you have any idea? And do you think that Stanley Kubrick's front screen projection was used? I know NASA and Stanley Kubrick had a very cozy relationship when he was making 2001: A Space Odyssey, and he had access to technology and cameras from NASA that nobody else on the planet had access to. I think that's a very, very interesting part of the story. What's your thought on how they pulled this off?
Well, actually, his relationship with the U.S. government and the military began long before that. It was actually during the making of the film Dr. Strangelove, where he got basically the technology of the B-52, put that in the background, and from then on, of course, the kind of the black humor, dark humor of the film was kind of very attractive and appealing to intellectuals in the military as well. So the military loved Dr. Strangelove. They thought it was a brilliant film. He got access to, at that time, pretty secretive equipment, photographed it in the film, and got away with it. And, of course, 2001, produced in 1966, 67, 68, was about going to the moon. And seeing how the moon missions were fake, that means someone was in charge of the fake photography. They could either hire the general of the media department at the Pentagon and have great security and amateur results, or they could hire the best filmmaker on the planet and worry about security later. Well, that's had to have been their choice for that short-term benefit. Sure enough, Kubrick was already in with the military through Dr. Strangelove. He was producing a film about going to the moon. Von Braun and Eugene Krantz, who we heard from earlier, they both visited the set of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And in the film The Shining, which Kubrick left all these clues, including the little red rum boy with an Apollo 11 shirt on, and then he insisted contractually, and good thing he did because he died before the film came out, that the film Eyes Wide Shut, like me looking at all those pictures on the wall without seeing the truth, he insisted that opened on the 30th anniversary of the launch to the moon, and that's when the film opened. And that NASA gave him this lens that could photograph in natural lighting, which he used for the film Barry Lyndon a few years earlier. Yes, there's a lot of connections. Now, his family, who I've talked to, they say, he would never do such an immoral thing as faking the moon landing. Well, the thing is, they don't get him like I do. They see him as dear old dad and dear old husband. But I kind of know him from a filmmaker's point of view. He just took it as a challenge. He didn't see it necessarily as an immoral issue. He saw it as a great filmmaker's challenge of a lifetime to make a film so real that people actually thought it was real, and that would be his little secret. He and a lot of people who were involved in the moon missions died at the age of 70, as did he. His wife knew something was suspicious. That's why she volunteered. Hey, there were no suspicious circumstances regarding his death, even though no one asked him about it. You know what I mean? And the odds are he had something to do with it. Whether or not that's relevant or not is another issue.
Yeah, well, the other thing about Kubrick is that, he may have been coerced. It's a little bit like taking a loan from the mafia. Once you've made that relationship with the mafia, they're probably not going to let you not take a second loan type of thing. And if you got some help on some of these other films, when they needed a favor, I think they called it in, and Stanley may have had to play ball. And I think the Stanley Kubrick part of the story is very, very intriguing, as is the use of front screen projection. There's a terrific documentary about Kubrick's potential involvement in these moon landings. The name of it escapes me. Do you know which one I mean?
Well, there's several. I think one is called Room 237.
Yeah.
And I forget the other ones, but I've been in touch with, I think, one or more of those filmmakers about it when it came to my attention, I think, in the late 80s, that there was that little red rum boy had the Apollo 11 shirt on him.
Yeah.
And, it's pretty interesting. I mean, he would be the guy they would choose to fake the moon missions, and the fact that he left little clues mentioning Apollo 11 in some of his films is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's intriguing, but let's circle back to the CIA, because I know in your film, you actually have a clip in the film. Let's just play that audio. Can you describe that audio? The 4-second delay and then talk?
NASA claims that the Houston transmissions were the only ones taking place with the astronauts. Listen now as Houston Control initiates a conversation with the crew, only to find them too preoccupied with the behind-the-scenes trickery to respond. Moments pass, and the oversight is picked up on by the clandestine third party, who quickly prompts them with talk. Immediately, Neil Armstrong speaks.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger. We're mapping in on Earth.
Again, the illusion they are attempting to create is the Earth at a distance to demonstrate their far journey from it.
Yeah, so I get back to, so after my hiatus of turning down the project and then reading the Bible and realizing that I'm going to die anyway, I might as well go out in a blaze of glory fighting for the truth, I changed my mind, decided to produce the film. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon. Raised about $1 million for the series of films, and about 3.5 years into this 5-year project, I again thought there was at least a 1 out of 4 chance that the moon missions were fake, but I was still trying to be open-minded and given the benefit of the doubt. Then about 3.5 years into this 5-year project, I pop in a tape and it says on the screen, "Do not show to the public."
An old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr., and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance.
So for detractors of the film who say this footage is readily available, all you got to do is see the beginning of the head of the reel. It says, "Do not show to the public." So for having that on the head of the reel and claiming it's widely available, it's a pretty big contradiction. It's amazing when people lie to prove their points, then their points are lies. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what Snopes does full time. That's all Snopes is it's to discredit viable and intelligent conspiracy theories. And in fact, many of them are just wide openly well-known conspiracies. They're not even theories anymore, like the whole 9/11 false flag event. I mean, but leave it to Snopes and these people to try to debunk everything. So, but that piece of footage, how did you get that footage? That just magically was mailed to you?
Well, Bill Casing thinks someone sent it to me deliberately. I can tell you that what was on the label of the tape and what was in the content of the tape were two different things. Most reporters were satisfied with their pre-edited compilation reels. So when the event happened and in all the subsequent anniversaries where they show a few seconds of the mission, they only looked at the first few tapes that came out of NASA's press office and were satisfied. I asked for everything, every picture, every video, every film footage, everything from just the first mission. I figured if they faked it, they're more likely to have made a mistake the first time they faked it. Well, after 20 or 30 of these reels being basically the same thing over and over again, I kind of got tired of looking at them. And when I was editing the film, not with nonlinear equipment, I had kind of postponed the first part of the film where I wanted the countdown in real time. And I always had clips of it going from a minute to 30 seconds to 10 seconds, but nothing a minute all the way down, which I thought would be kind of dramatic. So I finally went through the last couple of reels of footage that I had and popped one in. It said, "Do not show to the public," and I hit fast forward. And even though I had specifically asked for unedited footage, everything from NASA was edited, except this and one other reel. And so I'm seeing this shot of like a black TV screen with a little blue tennis ball-sized Earth in the middle of it for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, kind of wiggling around and thinking, oh, this is unedited footage. This should be pretty good. So I rewound it, hit it play, so watch it in real time. And you hear NASA say, actually it's Goldstone or something. No, it's NASA saying, NASA headquarters saying, hey, the TV picture looks great. Then there's about 4 seconds of dead air. And then Neil Armstrong says, yeah, we're glad the TV picture looks great, or something like that. But right before he responds, you hear crystal clear. So doesn't have a radio EQ of NASA, doesn't have the radio EQ of Houston or the astronauts. It's like crystal clear on a microphone, some third party saying talk.
Understand, too, that only about 20 seconds of this raw footage was ever broadcast to the public, and these conversations discussing their deception were believed to be private. Until now. Here they discuss that these television transmissions were in fact not broadcast live as everyone believed. They were first screened and edited for playback later.
Roger, Neil. We just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get to playback, we can sort of correlate what we're seeing. Thank you very much.
Here they discuss the fact that they have turned out the lights and have blocked out sunlight from entering the spacecraft through the other windows as to not cause any reflected light to fall onto the spacecraft's wall in the foreground.
Okay, very good. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
The reason this was done is so that the truth of the matter would not be revealed. It is this. Though the federal government would have you believe that this is a view of Earth from a distance out of the spacecraft's window as it nears the moon, it is not. What they have ingeniously done is placed the camera at the back of the spacecraft and centered the lens on a circular window in the foreground, outside of which it is completely filled with the Earth in low orbit. The circumference of the window then appears to be the diameter of the Earth at a distance, with the darkened walls of the spacecraft appearing to be the blackness of space around it. That is why they wanted the interior dark and blocked out the sun from entering through the other windows. Finally, the iris is opened up and you can see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window. Here is the slate for the 19th of July, and the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July, and then the 20th, and the same misleading shot on the 20th. Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier, and the moon is some 3 days' journey away? Furthermore, if they genuinely went to the moon, why would they be faking any part of it? Why this trickery with the window? By faking being halfway to the moon, it becomes apparent that they did so because they could not even go halfway. It thus confirms that the stumbling block to their success was the lethal radiation of the Van Allen radiation belts.
They're just in Earth orbit. They never left Earth orbit, right? They admitted it, in that clip of Kelly Smith from the Orion Project, that the Van Allen radiation belts, which don't begin until 1,000 miles above the Earth, and the space shuttle space station is only at 250 miles, and they say it's a dangerous field of radiation, when we must first develop the technology before we can send people through it.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. For this flight, it's time to head home.
So 2 or 3 years ago, NASA admitted the technology necessary to protect the astronauts from this dangerous radiation has yet to be invented. Hello, then how did they go through it and back to the moon? So the fact is they cannot leave Earth orbit. This fake footage that we uncovered an unedited version of is them pretending to be halfway to the moon, which proves they cannot leave Earth orbit. And after NASA says the TV picture looks great, after there's 4 seconds of dead air, we hear the CIA say, talk.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
Okay, Roger. We're mapping in on Earth.
And then Neil Armstrong starts speaking. Well, he could have heard them right away because he's only like 200 miles above the Earth. But if he had responded right away, it would have given away the fact that he's closer to the Earth than he was claiming to be, halfway to the moon. So it takes about 2 seconds for the radio signal to go out, about 2 seconds to come back. So he had a secret earpiece in, like a news broadcaster. And after he heard NASA speak, he was told, don't answer until we tell you to. And that's where the talk came from. Now, detractors of a funny thing happened on the way to the moon release, part of this footage. And they say, here we are releasing it to prove it means nothing. But they also edit out the word talk, which is highly significant. If they're editing out something to prove that the moon missions are real, and what they edit out proves that they're not real, that tells you something right there. So you can show that clip, and there they are. Someone's prompting the astronauts when to speak. And I'm like, wait a minute. There's three people talking here. There's NASA, there's the astronauts, and apparently the CIA telling them only to talk after 4 seconds go by. And then I realized this little blue Earth, that looks like the blue Earth. And if I had only seen 5 or 10 seconds of it, like the public saw, I would think that was the Earth floating in space. But we have the unedited version, which shows them, they claim, the lens is at the glass. They say they have one window that faces the Earth. It's filled up with the TV camera, meaning the lens is at the glass to shoot the little blue Earth far away. But in fact, the camera's at the back of the spacecraft. They turn out all the lights, and they even talk about how they're faking it because they thought these conversations would be edited out. And then several feet in front of the camera, in the dark spacecraft, is a circular window outside of which it's filled with the Earth in low orbit. So you're seeing a portion of the Earth outside of the window. They even insert a little crescent piece of black material into the window to make it look like the Terminator line. And it looks really convincing if they show you the best 5 or 10 seconds. But we have the outtake of like an arm getting in front of the window when they take down the screen or whatever they have constructing it. And it's really remarkable. I watched the footage 3.5 years into it, and I'm thinking, they're faking being halfway to the moon. And it took me a second. I'm like, they're faking being halfway to the moon. What does that mean? It means they could not go halfway. Because if they really could go halfway, we'd be seeing the real Earth out the window halfway to the moon. So the fact that they're faking being halfway to the moon means they cannot leave Earth orbit. And all the equipment was identical. So if your 1969 Volkswagen Bug can't go 500 miles an hour, none of them can. And if this Apollo spacecraft, Apollo 11, cannot leave Earth orbit, none of them left Earth orbit. And oddly enough, the second time they go to the moon, they accidentally, in quotes, point the camera at the sun, meaning there's virtually no live pictures for the whole mission. Apollo 13 launched on April 13th at 1313 military time. It's so Masonic, it's not funny. They allegedly had this accident so that people who were complaining reruns of I Love Lucy were being interrupted now had a moment of jeopardy and interest to watch the moon missions again. So by the time Apollo 14 rolls around, they've had 2 years without Kubrick's help to figure out how to properly fake the moon missions. But people had already accepted they were real, so they could have made them less technically proficient, and people would have still believed it because they had already accepted it. It's kind of the reverse of, Sean, if I said, hey, I'm going to take you out to this great restaurant, and I take you there, and you got this nice steak and potato, and right before you take a bite, this cockroach crawls across your plate. 10 years from now, you're not remembering the steak or the salad or the great service. You remember the cockroach. It's burned in your brain. And people, the opposite of this, it's like it burned in people's brain. They're on the moon. They cried. Walter Cronkite cried. And so it's got to be real. And taking away that impression is really difficult to do.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to ask you this. You mentioned earlier in the interview that it was Eugene Kranz being associated with Kubrick back in those early days. And it just dawned on me that clip that I played earlier, that's Eugene Kranz.
I haven't seen anything that indicates the telemetry data is even in existence. And as I said, even if we had it, we don't have the machines to play it back.
But your own research has shown the telemetry data is missing.
That's right.
Is that the same Gene Kranz who is the hero in Apollo 13 and is played by the Hollywood actor Ed Harris?
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option.
Is that the same Gene Kranz?
Yeah, he was the flight director. So basically, if you see the funny thing happened on the way to the moon, which I know you'll link to, there's this great dolly shot right before I saw the rockets exploding. Dolly shot meaning it's like going from left to right, past all the computer consoles. I want you to take a look at that again. And notice everybody's kind of kicked back watching television. No one's really doing anything. They have like 20, 30, 40 TV screens, headquarters, and no one's really doing anything. They're just kicked back. And that moment in time is like seconds before they go to the moon for the very first time, and they're doing nothing but watching television. You see, the number one reason I hear why the moon missions must be real is because 200,000 people are involved, and those number of people couldn't keep a secret. Well, of course. You really think they're going to be stupid enough to tell the guy who made the glove or the door or the boot, hey, good job, but okay, let me let you in on a little secret. The moon landings are fake. Don't tell anybody. Give me a break. The computer consoles, who are closer there than almost anybody, did not know that the moon missions were fake. One of them confessed years ago. They could tell no difference whatsoever between a simulation and an actual flight. So the computer console people didn't know. The astronauts obviously knew. Von Braun knew. And probably the flight director knew, so that he could steer people's mind away from mistakes as they happened into believing that they really went. But we're talking about just a handful of people knowing. You know, the atomic bomb involved 150,000 people, and yet they did not know what they were working on. There were only like 8 people who knew what the atomic bomb really was once you put all those parts together. The same thing. It's like, yes, you could not keep a secret from 200,000 people. That's why you didn't tell them. That's like saying, you know, a teller at the bank knows what the CEO knows. That's just no way true. The teller at the bank doesn't even know what the bank manager knows, and the bank manager doesn't know what the regional branch guy knows, and then so on. And he doesn't know what the vice president knows, and the vice president doesn't know what the CEO knows.
Well, and guess what? And the teller certainly doesn't know about the Federal Reserve System that prints all the money out of thin air. And that, I mean, you're right. It's all compartmentalized. It's all need-to-know basis. And if it's the CIA involved in this thing, then certainly it's going to be compartmentalized. And I get a real kick out of that Eugene Krantz soundbite that NASA lost 14,000 reels of scientific moon landing data. And it's probably because they never had it in the first place. That's why they can't release any of that stuff. That's why they burned it all. They threw it all away, because it would have proven the hoax.
But your own research has shown the telemetry data is missing.
That's right.
Well, yeah, the State Department, by the way, going back to Von Braun, the State Department said, had Von Braun not died when he did, like in 1975, he was weeks away from being indicted as a war criminal, you know, and for contributing to the genocide of thousands of slave laborers working on the V-1 or V-2 rocket during the war. And so, you know, the guy was a Nazi, and they knew all about deception and propaganda and things like this. You know, what's most hypocritical, we know the Bible says that people who teach or instruct the law are to be judged more strictly than everybody else. And yet our government is the exact opposite. All these laws that apply to you and I do not apply to the Congress and the Senate or the president or the FBI and all that stuff, which is exactly the opposite of morality. And so you have all these organizations that write laws. For example, after World War II, they said, okay, now propaganda, government-issued propaganda, they wrote a law. They said it's illegal for the press, the media, or the CIA or anyone to publish propaganda. What do you think the moon landing was? That was nothing but propaganda. Then you had in the late 1950s the quiz show scandal, where Time magazine had on its cover the smartest man in America, who was smart because he got the answers in advance. So to prevent that from happening again, Congress wrote a law. You cannot use television to deceive people. Of course, that does not apply to the government, who uses television to deceive people through the moon landings. I mean, the moon landings have to be real, because if they're not real, it means our country is so corrupt. It's mind-boggling. And that's why people still believe it's real, because they don't want to face the reality that our government is totally corrupt, totally immoral, total liars, and embezzlers of money, murderers of people. The original founding document that we each have the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, according to Gus Grissom's own son, who's a 747 pilot. His father was murdered in the Apollo 1 rocket because he was not playing ball with NASA. He, in my mind, was not going to go along with faking the moon missions, so they took him out. So we have a government that takes away your right to life. Isn't that amazing? The government that our founding fathers say we have the right to life, they took it away. We have a government supposed to be of the people. Well, heck, the Congress and the Senate didn't even vote to fake the moon landing. That was done for us by the CIA. So it's a government of the CIA, of the obscure 1/1000th of 1% minority. So we don't have a government of the people anymore. It's mind-boggling, because if the moon missions are fake, that's what all of this means. It means we have a shadow government, that it's not a government of the people, that the government is taking away individual targeted assassinations of people who do not cooperate with the immoral behavior. That's what all of that means if the moon landings are fake. And yes, indeed, they are fake, and that means all the rest is true.
Yeah, and you mentioned the propaganda against the people. I think it was the Smith-Mundt Act that was passed in the 70s to prevent the government from propagandizing to people in the domestic United States. And it was repealed in 2013, allowing the State Department and the government to deliberately propagandize, that means lie, folks, to the people. That's the nature of what we're up against. And you know what? I think you start your film, don't you? You start A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon with Matthew 10:26. And no, it's nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, right?
That's right.
For the time is coming when everything that is covered will be revealed, and all that's secret will be made known to all. And I feel like we are hitting that tipping point with the deep state and the shadow government being laid bare, with this bogus Russia meddling in our elections nonsense and the witch hunt out for President Trump. I feel like it's all being laid bare. You know, I think as we wrap this up, I just want to mention this too. We didn't get into SpaceX. We really don't have time, but I'll just leave folks with this. Elon Musk launching a roadster into space. You know what, guys? It just seems, again, to me like propaganda. And I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I will show this video glitch.
Oops. Let me say the most relevant thing. You asked for an opinion about Elon Musk. Let me say the most relevant thing about SpaceX regarding whether the moon missions are real or not.
And you can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly.
Why he wants his fuel vehicles to descend burning fuel rather than by parachute is kind of a mystery to me. You know what I mean? It seems a little inefficient. But his vertical landing of these rockets as they come back down is beautiful. And I suspect they're real. But here's the point, though. In order to do the first vertical landing successfully, I think at least 10 of them blew up. So here we have a half a century better rocket and computer technology than Apollo 11, and the first vertical landing took 10 times.
Well, I will play right now a piece of video here from a SpaceX live feed that was put up on YouTube of these vertical rocket landings that you've just described, and this live feed has been edited. The live feed was put up, and then they edited it after some anomalies were pointed out, and they fixed the anomalies.
It's something that no other channel is allowed to do. Who edits live video? Does the NFL, MLB, NHL, WWE, or the NBA? No. Does Reds Rhetoric, Sean Hufford, Slice Barkane, or Soundly? No. Nathan Oakley, Globebusters, Iron Realm Media, or anyone else on YouTube?
And I just think that there's more to the story with all of this stuff. And one last thing about SpaceX. These flights are run like college football games with all the cheering and nonsense. There's something strange going on with SpaceX. I mean, a Boeing 777 is flown with more professionalism than these space flights, which are, every time you watch a live one, it's like a college football game with these kids cheering.
Well, because, Sean, you and I come from a biblical point of view, let me share this insight. I was watching what you're talking about the other day. Okay, so the rocket takes off or it lands, and everyone applauds. What they're doing, Sean, is they're applauding themselves. It's like, okay, I made a toaster, I plugged it in, it made toast. Aren't I great?
Yeah, but
it's applauding yourself.
Oh, agreed. But it feels like so much propaganda because, again,
we know applauding yourself is dangerous.
Yeah, but who are all these SpaceX people that just have the time to just stand around and celebrate like a big party? Like, again, the flight controls on the flight deck of a 777 are much more buckled down, as is the flight control tower. Right? You can't be cheering and having a grand old party every time a 777 takes off or lands. Look, I've been on airplanes with pilots. It's extremely professional. That's not what's happening at SpaceX. So again, they got caught editing a live feed that had been posted to YouTube and then changed later to alter these anomalies. They showed 2 rockets coming down, the vertical landings. It was clear that they were the exact same image on both cameras, and they changed it to make it look as though both of those rockets were coming down independently and landing on 2 different landing pads. They changed it. And so why did they change it? Why?
That I don't know. Let me make sure I say one thing, though, before we go, Sean. Back when Bill Casey first did Oprah Winfrey Show, okay, back when Oprah Winfrey was, just getting recognized. With the first time he went on national TV and said the moon landings are fake, immediately the CIA came out and said, oh, yeah, and you believe the world is flat, too. And then the same thing, when I make my movie, when people read my article, when I do TV interviews and say the moon landings are fake, then all this stuff about the Earth being flat comes up. Look, people, the Earth is round. If it were flat, lighthouses would be at ground level rather than elevated, okay? I don't know why you would think. A bubble always forms a sphere, and planets as they form in the antimatter space with pressure around them always form as spheres for the same reason. Same way a bubble under the water always forms a sphere. Things naturally form spheres. Lighthouses are elevated because the Earth is curved. The flat Earth and the moon landings have nothing whatsoever to do with one another. It's only the CIA misinformation. Because here's the thing. What's his name on the radio show? Who's the #1 conspiracy guy out there? What's his name?
Alex Jones?
Alex Jones, okay. He will never touch the moon landing topic. Now, you can think into that to a little bit deeper degree and figure that one out. Because if the truth comes out that the moon landings are fake, it means the CIA runs the government. It means so many horrible, horrible, horrible things that he won't even touch that topic. And the fact is, 100% the moon landings were fake. It's so simple. If they could have done this with 50 years older technology 50 years ago, there would be bases on the moon by now. Men would have been on Mars 25 years ago. The farthest a man can go today is 1/1000th the distance that they claim to have done 50 years ago with antiquated technology. The 747 took 160 engine design attempts before it got off the ground with 10 years newer technology than the Apollo rocket. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's never been a milestone in history that once accomplished, no one could repeat for 50 years except going to the moon. There's never been a technological breakthrough where all the schematics and everything were deliberately destroyed except going to the moon. To me, whether the Earth is triangular, a cube, circular, oval, or shaped like an octagon is irrelevant. I mean, there's a creator. Things don't make themselves. Cars don't make themselves. And the human body is departmentalized just like a car. There are components that, mimic a car, heart, fuel pump, and so forth, cooling system, nervous system for electrical wiring. Cars don't make themselves. People don't make themselves. Evolution says a lower form of life created a higher form of life. That's the exact opposite of logic. That's like a kindergarten teaching algebra. We were made. The government is so afraid that the truth about the moon landings are going to come out. Imagine what it would mean if the truth came out that the moon landings are fake. The government would be reformed from head to toe.
Yeah. Well, and it's UNESCO. It's UNESCO that came up with this whole idea of selling people on this Darwinist theory of evolution and taking God out of the conversation. It's been done purposefully, and I think we come full circle here quite nicely with this quote from Wernher von Braun, who said, quote, "My experience with science led me to God. They challenge science to prove the existence of God, but must we really light a candle to see the sun?" And I think it's thought-provoking to realize that everything, guys, we've pretty much ever been told has been a lie. So is it not possible that the moon landings, the way they were told officially, was also a lie? I seem not to be able to end this interview, Bart, because I just sparked another thought. Have you been on the Joe Rogan show? I feel like you have been interviewed by Joe Rogan.
I think I have. He and I know we met, I believe, in person in Los Angeles, had dinner together. Yeah. He's the guy who used to do that show where you eat cockroaches, is that right?
Yeah, Fear Factor, and he's got one of the most popular podcasts in the world, the Joe Rogan Experience. And
he and I have met and talked for hours privately in L.A. about this topic. Yeah, what he says publicly may be something different.
I think somebody got to him because for a very long time he was a hardcore, eloquent prognosticator on the fact that it's almost 99.9% certain the moon landings were hoaxed. And only in the last few years has he sort of changed his tune to say, I'm a dumb guy, what do I know? So now he kind of says, well, I buy the official story because it's Occam's razor and it's easier to believe we went than not went.
But Occam's razor is true, but they've inverted it, and they've tricked you that they've inverted it.
Agreed.
Which is easier to do, to make a film about going to Mars or to actually go to Mars?
100% agree. And so I feel like...
The simplest explanation is true, because technology does not go backwards, right? Yeah. So if they could go to the moon, I mean, the Wright brothers had a motorized kite, and they couldn't even get it off the ground in 20 attempts. And yet they're claiming the most difficult aerospace mission worked the first time, and that's never happened in the history of flight on anything. The 747 didn't get off the ground after 160 attempts. The Wright brothers took 20 attempts, and they're claiming the most difficult one worked on the first attempt with 50 years older technology, with 1/1,000,000th of computing power and a cell phone, and yet they can't repeat it today. Yep. No nation on Earth can repeat it today. They did cold fusion, but they can't repeat it for 50 years. Technology does not go backwards. It's so simple.
Yeah.
People just will not give up this sacred cow. How dare you say the U.S. government lied about that? The U.S. government lies all the time. I was watching Obama, and they asked him, where do you have plans to go to watch the Super Bowl? And he just smiled and said, we haven't decided yet. And you could tell he was lying. He can't even say the truth like, I can't tell you that for security reasons. I mean, he lies about everything. You know what I mean? Every president just, lies all the time. Eisenhower went on there. Have you got spy planes flying over Russia? Nope. Oh, one was shot down 3 weeks later. Why didn't he just say no comment? Or maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't discuss those things. It's just so sad. Here's the spiritual picture. The greatest event in human history, secular at least, is putting a man on the moon. So how ironic. In the fallen, disgusting world, we live in a world where half the people don't have clean drinking water, where 1% of the population owns, 50% of the wealth. And in that world, it's just so poetically profound that the greatest event in human history didn't happen. The Titanic, the ship that God himself could not sink, never made one voyage. The Tower of Babel to reach to the heavens, never finished. It's just so in line with the human pride, arrogance. It's just, to me, it reeks of a message from the Almighty to say, what have you guys done? It's just stooping so low. They lied for really no reason. There was really no reason to do it other than arrogance, pride, greed, to misallocate money. It's just pathetic. And in our country, I'm a patriot. People think I'm unpatriotic for saying this. No. What's unpatriotic is to have faked the moon missions. Those are the people who are unpatriotic, going around claiming to this day they went to the moon where they didn't. Those are traitors to our country. A government should be small and of the people and run by the people, and a government should tell the truth. Isn't that the case? So we're patriotic saying the moon missions are fake because they were fake, and them faking it was wrong. And unless you confess your sin, you're just painting over mold that's going to infest the nation in the future. So better to get that mold out now before it becomes worse.
Amen. Guys, I'll put a link to a funny thing happened on the way to the moon in the more information section below. And if you want to learn more, you can visit. Well, why don't you shout out your website there, Bart?
Yeah, just go to mylastname.com, Sibrel, S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel, S-I-B-R-E-L.com. You'll have a link to my YouTube channel, which you can watch A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. You'll have a link to Conspiracy Corner News at the Sleuth Journal. Just go down about 5 articles and read the article about why we didn't go to the moon. If you can read that article and still think we went to the moon, I don't know. 4 out of 5 people who previously thought the moon missions were real changed their mind after watching a funny thing happen on the way to the moon. But that article goes into so much detail, so much proof that the moon missions were fake. And again, it's just simple logic. To claim that they went to the moon 50 years ago and that they cannot go today, they can only go 1/1000th of the distance today with 50 years more technology, is completely illogical. Technology does not go backwards, and they would not destroy the technology if they really went to the moon. They would only do that to cover the...
Our guest has been Bart Sibrel. Bart, thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Sean, if I could throw on one more scripture, it says, have nothing to do with the fruitless leads of darkness, but rather expose them.
Amen. Amen, my friend. Well, it was a real pleasure to talk with you. It's nice to finally meet you. I really did appreciate watching your film the first time and the second time. I'll probably watch it again. Bart, take care of yourself, and thanks so much.
Keep up the good work, Sean, on your channel.
All right, I will try, and I do appreciate you, and I appreciate everybody for tuning in. A special thanks to our patrons over at patreon.com. You're making a world of difference for us, and thanks for visiting us every day at sgtreport.com for real news 24/7. God bless. Bye-bye.